The Art of a Quiet Mind with Positive Psychology. Hey there, friend. Welcome to another deep dive here on Mindscape. Today, we're going to talk about something that might just change the way you see your entire life. We're exploring the book, The Art of a Quiet Mind with Positive Psychology by Dr. Marcus Penn. And let me tell you, this isn't just another self-help book that tells you to think positive and everything will magically fall into place. No, this is about understanding the real mechanics of inner peace and why most of us are living with a constant storm inside our heads without even realizing it. So, here's the thing. If I asked you right now, what's bothering you the most? Chances are you'd point to something external. Maybe it's your job, your relationship, your bank account, or even the weather. But here's the uncomfortable truth that Dr. Penn wants us to face. The biggest source of our mental noise isn't what's happening around us. It's what we're trying to control. That was never ours to control in the first place. Think about it. How many hours have you spent replaying conversations in your head? Why did she say that? What did he really mean? If only I had responded differently. Or worse, those endless loops of regret. If only I had taken that job. If only I hadn't trusted that person. If only I could go back to that moment. These thoughts don't just pass through your mind. They set up camp. They build a home. And before you know it, your head is filled with so much noise that even on a quiet Sunday morning, you can't find peace. Dr. Penn calls this the uncontrollable obsession. And it's killing our mental health, one overthought at a time. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're holding a rope. On the other end of that rope is everything you're trying to control. Your partner's mood, your boss's opinion of you, the outcome of a project you've been working on for months, the way your family sees you, the economy, traffic, other, people's decisions. Now, here's the brutal reality. You're pulling on that rope with all your strength, trying to drag all of these things toward you, trying to make them behave the way you want. But the harder you pull, the more exhausted you become. Because that rope, it's not attached to anything on the other end. You're pulling against air, against variables you have zero control over. And the tragedy is, we spend our entire lives doing this. From the time we're kids, we're trained to believe that control equals success. Get good grades, control your future. Work hard, control your career. Be a good person, control how others treat you. We're fed this narrative that if we just try hard enough, plan well enough, sacrifice enough, we can shape reality to match our expectations. But reality doesn't work that way. Reality is messy. It's unpredictable. It's influenced by a million factors that have nothing to do with you. Other people aren't characters in your story that you can script. They have their own wounds, their own fears, their own past experiences that shape how they behave. But we take everything personally, don't we? Someone ignores your text, and suddenly you're spiraling. Do they hate me? Did I do something wrong? Am I not important to them? Someone criticizes your work, and you internalize it as proof that you're not good enough. Someone you love behaves in a toxic way, and instead of setting boundaries, you twist yourself into a pretzel trying to fix them, thinking that if you just love them harder, sacrifice more, Adjust your behavior enough, they'll change. This is where the mental exhaustion begins. This is where anxiety plants its roots. And then there's the past. Oh, the past. We know, logically, that the past cannot be changed. It's a closed chapter, a done deal. But our minds don't care about logic, do they? Our minds love to time travel. Every single day, your brain will pull up old scenes like a movie on repeat. That argument you had 5 years ago. That relationship that ended badly. That opportunity you missed. That mistake you made. And it doesn't just show you the memory, it adds commentary. You idiot. You should have known better. You ruined everything. Dr. Penn describes this as voluntary suffering. You're not being forced to relive these moments. You're choosing to. And I know that sounds harsh, but stay with me here, because understanding that you're choosing this is actually empowering. It means you can also choose to stop. Here's what happens when we try to control the uncontrollable. We create an illusion of power. We think, if I just worry about this enough, I can prevent it. If I just analyze this situation from every possible angle, I'll figure out what went wrong. But worrying isn't planning. Overthinking isn't problem solving. It's just mental noise disguised as productivity. So how do we begin to let go? Dr. Penn says it starts with one simple but profound question. In this situation, what is actually within my control and what is not? Most people can't answer this question clearly, because we've been conditioned to believe that everything is our responsibility. Someone insults you, you think it's your job to prove them wrong. Someone leaves you, you think it's your fault. A project fails, you think you should have done more. But let's break this down. Someone insults you. That event, their words, their tone, their decision to be cruel, that was not in your control. That happened. It's done. But here's what is in your control. The story you tell yourself about that insult. You can choose to attach it to your self-worth and spiral into shame. Or you can choose to see it for what it is. A reflection of that person's limitations, not yours. This small gap between the event and your reaction, that's where your freedom lives. That's where your power actually is. Now, I want to pause here and address something important. A lot of people hear, "let it go," and think it means being weak. They think it means giving up, rolling over, accepting bad behavior, or becoming emotionally numb. But that's not what letting go is. Letting go is one of the bravest things you can do. It takes immense courage to walk away from a toxic relationship. It takes strength to stop trying to control someone who refuses to grow. It takes guts to release the past and stop punishing yourself for things you can't change. We stay stuck because we're scared. Scared of loneliness. Scared of what people will think. Scared of admitting we were wrong. Scared of uncertainty. So we cling. We cling to relationships that are slowly destroying us. We cling to resentment because it feels safer than forgiveness. We cling to control because letting go feels like free-falling. But here's the paradox. The moment you let go of the uncontrollable, you actually gain control. Not over external circumstances, but over yourself, over your reactions, over your peace of mind, over your energy. And that, my friend, is the only control that ever mattered. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in a relationship where the other person is emotionally unavailable. They're hot and cold. One day they're all in, the next day they're distant. You try everything. You communicate better. You give them space. You support them. You love them harder. But nothing changes. Now, here's the question. Can you control whether they heal their emotional wounds? Can you control whether they choose to show up for you? No, you can't. The only thing you can control is whether you continue to accept that behavior. And this is where letting go becomes an act of self-respect, not selfishness. You're not abandoning them. You're choosing not to abandon yourself. Dr. Penn talks a lot about toxic relationships as the ultimate example of trying to control the uncontrollable. You can love someone, you can support them, you can encourage them, but you cannot heal them if they don't want to be healed. And yet, we try. We make ourselves responsible for other people's growth. We think, if I just adjust a little more, sacrifice a little more, maybe they'll finally change. But they won't, because change doesn't work that way. Change is an inside job, and no amount of external pressure from you will make someone do their inner work. So you exhaust yourself. You lose pieces of yourself. You become smaller and smaller, hoping that your shrinking will somehow make them grow. And in the process, you forget who you were before this relationship consumed you. Letting go here isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's saying, I love you, but I love myself too. And I refuse to drown while trying to save someone who isn't even reaching for the lifeboat. Now let's talk about other people's opinions, because this is another huge area where we waste our energy trying to control the uncontrollable. What will people think? What will they say? How will they judge me? These questions run our lives. We make decisions based not on what we want, but on what we think will earn approval. We dim our dreams because we're scared of criticism. We edit our personalities because we're terrified of rejection. But here's the truth. People are going to have opinions no matter what you do. You could be the kindest, most generous, most successful person on the planet, and someone, somewhere, will still find a reason to criticize you. So if you're going to be judged anyway, wouldn't it make more sense to live according to your values instead of someone else's expectations? Other people's opinions are not facts. They're interpretations. And those interpretations are shaped by their experiences, their insecurities, their biases, not by your worth. When you understand this, criticism loses its sting. It stops being a reflection of you and becomes information about them. Letting go doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It doesn't mean you pretend nothing hurts. Pain is real. Anger is real. Disappointment is real. And all of those feelings are valid. But letting go means you feel those emotions without letting them move in permanently. You acknowledge the pain, you sit with it, you let it teach you, and then you let it pass. Emotions are meant to be visitors, not residents. When we hold on to uncontrollable things, our present suffers. Physically, we're here, but mentally, we're stuck in the past or lost in an imaginary future. Someone is sitting right in front of us, but we're not really listening because we're replaying yesterday's argument or rehearsing tomorrow's confrontation. This is why so many of us feel disconnected. Not because we're alone, but because we're never fully present. Letting go brings you back to now, and now is the only place where life actually happens. The past is a memory. The future is a possibility. But now, this moment right here, this is where your power lives. Your reactions are within your control, and that's more powerful than you think. Most people believe that reactions are automatic. Someone triggers you, and boom, you explode. But reactions can be trained. They can be slowed down. The next time something triggers you, try this. Take a deep breath, just one. And in that breath, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? Am I giving this person's behavior more power than my own peace? That pause, that tiny moment of space, can change everything. Our ego is another massive roadblock to letting go. The ego wants to be right. It wants to win every argument. It wants the other person to admit they were wrong. But not every battle is worth fighting. Sometimes peace is more valuable than being right. Sometimes silence is more powerful than having the last word. Letting go of the past is especially hard because we tie it to our identity. We think, what happened to me is who I am. But you are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to be right now. The past can be a teacher, sure, but it doesn't have to be a prison. Why would you sacrifice today for something that can't be changed? Letting go is a process, not a one-time decision. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days, old thoughts will creep back in. And that's okay. That's human. Every time the thought returns, gently let it go. Don't judge yourself for having it. Practice self-compassion. You're not a machine. You're a human being trying to heal. When you start letting go of the uncontrollable, something magical happens. Life feels lighter. The same problems exist, but they don't weigh you down the same way. You stop taking everything personally. You start seeing that most people are fighting their own battles, and their behavior toward you often has nothing to do with you at all. The biggest freedom comes when you accept this. You can't make everyone happy. You can't fix everything. You can't undo every mistake. But you can choose your response. You can decide where to invest your energy. And you can choose peace over control. Life isn't about control. It's about choice. Control is an illusion. Choice is reality. And when you let go of the uncontrollable, you finally step into real control. Control over your mind, your emotions, your peace. Letting go doesn't make you cold or indifferent. It makes you wise. It makes you more aware of where to invest and where to walk away. You don't fight every battle, but when something truly matters, you stand your ground with full strength. In the end, letting go isn't a loss. It's an exchange. You trade anxiety for peace. You trade overthinking for clarity. You trade chaos for inner silence. And that silence, that quiet mind, is the most powerful thing you can cultivate. Action over outcome, breaking free from anxiety. All right, so we've talked about letting go of what we can't control. But now, let's address the elephant in the room, anxiety. Specifically, the kind of anxiety that comes from obsessing over outcomes instead of focusing on what we're actually doing right now. Most of our anxiety isn't about the present moment. It's about the future. Think about it. You're sitting here right now, reading this or listening to this. Are you in danger right now? Probably not. Is something terrible happening to you in this exact moment? Most likely, no. So where is all that anxiety coming from? It's coming from your mind racing ahead, projecting into a future that doesn't even exist yet. What if this doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I'm not good enough? These aren't questions about now. These are ghosts of a future that hasn't happened, haunting your present moment. And here's the kicker. While you're busy worrying about tomorrow, you're completely missing today. Dr. Penn introduces a concept that sounds simple, but is actually revolutionary when you apply it. Action over outcome. This means shifting your entire focus from the result you're hoping for to the action you're taking right now. When you're fully immersed in doing, fear doesn't have room to breathe. Let me explain why this works. We've been raised in an outcome-obsessed culture. From childhood, everything has been about results. Study hard so you can get good grades. Get good grades so you can get into a good college. Get into a good college so you can land a good job. Get a good job so you can get promoted. Get promoted so you can finally feel successful. Everything is a means to an end. Nothing is valuable for its own sake. We've been trained to see the journey as just a necessary inconvenience before we reach the destination. And because of this, we don't actually experience our lives. We're always one step ahead, planning, worrying, calculating. We read a book, but we're more focused on finishing it than actually absorbing it. We work on a project, but we're so stressed about the outcome that we don't enjoy the process. We're in conversations, but we're already thinking about what we're going to say next. This is exhausting, and it's the primary fuel for anxiety. Here's what happens when you're outcome-focused. Your mind jumps to the end before you've even started. Let's say you're preparing for a presentation. Instead of focusing on researching, organizing your thoughts, and practicing your delivery, your brain immediately fast-forwards to the moment you're standing in front of everyone. And then it spirals. What if I mess up? What if I forget my lines? What if they think I'm incompetent? What if this ruins my reputation? Notice how none of these thoughts are helpful. They don't improve your preparation. They don't make you more confident. They just paralyze you. Because the outcome, the actual moment of the presentation, is not in your control. You can't control how people will react. You can't control if the projector will work. You can't control if someone will ask a question you don't know the answer to. The only thing you can control is how well you prepare. The action, the now. Dr. Penn teaches that when anxiety hits, you need to pull yourself back to this one question. What can I do right now in this moment? Not tomorrow, not after everything is perfect, right now. What's the next small step? Maybe it's sending one email. Maybe it's reading one page. Maybe it's making one phone call. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be real. Because small, consistent actions are what build big outcomes. But we can't see that when we're too busy staring at the mountaintop, panicking about how we'll ever get there. Let's get real for a second. The reason we obsess over outcomes is because we've tied our identity to results. We believe deep down that we're only valuable if we succeed, if we win, if we achieve, if we impress. So every task becomes a referendum on our worth. Every project is a test of whether we deserve to exist. No wonder we're anxious. We've turned life into a pass or fail exam, where our entire sense of self is on the line. But what if your identity wasn't tied to outcomes? What if it was tied to effort instead? What if you saw yourself as someone who shows up, who tries, who puts in the work, regardless of the result? That shift changes everything. Because now, whether you win or lose, you still respect yourself. The outcome becomes secondary. Your integrity, your effort, your consistency, that becomes primary. A lot of people don't even start because they're terrified of the outcome. They think, what if I give this my all and it still doesn't work out? What if I try my hardest and still fail? That will hurt even more. So they don't try. They protect themselves from potential pain by never putting themselves out there. But that's just another form of outcome obsession. You're so focused on avoiding a bad result that you rob yourself of the experience altogether. When you adopt an action-based mindset, starting becomes easier. You're not telling yourself, I need to conquer the world today. You're just saying, I need to do this one thing right now. That's it. And that's manageable. That doesn't trigger the same level of fear. There's a psychological state called flow. You've probably experienced it before. It's when you're so absorbed in what you're doing that time disappears. You're not thinking about the outcome. You're not worried about what people will think. You're just doing. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists call it being lost in the work. Dr. Penn calls it the natural result of action-focused living. Flow can't exist when you're obsessed with outcomes, because flow requires you to be fully present. And if you're constantly peeking ahead, checking the scoreboard, wondering if you're good enough, you pull yourself out of the present. You fracture your attention, and anxiety rushes in to fill that gap. Now, let me be clear about something. Action over outcome doesn't mean you stop caring about results. It doesn't mean results don't matter. Of course they matter. But here's the thing. Results are not fully in your control. You can give your absolute best effort, and the outcome can still be influenced by timing, luck, other people, circumstances beyond your control. If you attach your peace of mind solely to results, then every uncontrollable variable becomes a threat to your mental health. The people who succeed long-term aren't the ones who are obsessed with winning. They're the ones who fall in love with the process. The writer writes because they love writing, not just because they want a bestseller. The athlete trains because they love the discipline, not just for the medal. When you enjoy the process, the journey itself becomes meaningful. The destination is just a bonus. Social media has made outcome obsession even worse. We only see people's highlight reels, the success, the money, the awards, the finished product. We don't see the years of boring, repetitive practice. We don't see the failures. We don't see the days when they wanted to quit. So we think, if I'm not seeing results quickly, I must be doing something wrong. But that's not how growth works. Every significant achievement is built on thousands of small, unsexy actions that nobody ever sees. Focusing on action also changes your self-talk. Instead of saying, "I have to succeed at this," or "I'm worthless," you say, "I'm going to give today my best effort." That language reduces pressure. It shifts your brain from threat mode into learning mode. And when you're in learning mode, you're open, curious, creative. When you're in threat mode, you're rigid, scared, defensive. Here's a practical exercise Dr. Penn recommends. Whenever you feel anxious, ask yourself, what is one thing I can do right now? Notice the question isn't, how do I guarantee success? Or, how do I make sure nothing goes wrong? It's simply, what can I do now? The answer might be small. Make a list, send a text, take a walk, do 10 minutes of research. But that small action grounds you. It pulls you out of the imaginary future and plants you back in reality. Outcome obsession also makes us impatient. We want immediate results. We want to see progress right away. But real growth is slow. It's incremental. It's often invisible for long stretches of time. When you focus only on action, patience develops naturally. Because your satisfaction comes from the effort itself, not just from external validation. When you're action-focused, comparison also decreases. You're not measuring yourself against other people's results. You're measuring yourself by one simple question. Did I show up today? Did I do the work? If the answer is yes, then your day was successful, regardless of the outcome. This mindset also makes you humble. When success comes, you don't get arrogant because you know it wasn't just you. Timing played a role. Luck played a role. Other people played a role. And when failure comes, you don't collapse because you know you did your part. You showed up. You gave your effort. That's all you can ever control. And that realization brings emotional stability. You're not riding the roller coaster of external validation anymore. You're grounded in your own integrity. Over time, you'll notice that the intensity of anxiety decreases. Fear doesn't disappear completely. That would be unrealistic. But it stops controlling you. You learn to act even when you're afraid. And that, my friend, is real courage. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Life is not an exam where only the final grade matters. Life is a practice ground. It's the daily effort that shapes you, not just the occasional trophy. When you loosen your grip on outcomes and hold tightly to your actions, life starts to feel more manageable. Less like a high-stakes gamble, and more like a series of choices you get to make every single day. Here's the reminder you might need to hear. Your job is to try, not to guarantee. The universe asks for your effort, not your perfection. When you truly accept that, the weight of anxiety starts to lift. You begin living in the present, and that present, lived fully, gradually builds the future you were so worried about. But here's the irony. The future you create through present-focused action is often better than the one you were trying to force through anxiety and control. Because when you're present, you're clear. When you're clear, you make better decisions. When you make better decisions, better outcomes follow. Not because you're obsessing over them, but because you're no longer getting in your own way. So let's make a deal, you and I. For the next week, try this. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into what-if thinking, pause, take a breath, and ask, what's one action I can take right now? Just one. And then do it. Don't think about the outcome. Don't think about whether it's enough. Just do that one thing. And then the next. And then the next. You'll be amazed at how much noise disappears when you stop trying to predict the future and start participating in the now. The art of slowing down, reclaiming your mind from the rush. Let's talk about speed. Our world is moving faster than ever before. And I don't just mean technology or the pace of change, I mean us. We're moving faster, thinking faster, reacting faster, living faster. And we've convinced ourselves that this is normal, that this is just how life is now. You wake up, and before your eyes are even fully open, you're reaching for your phone. Notifications flood in. Emails, messages, news headlines screaming for your attention. You scroll through social media while brushing your teeth. You eat breakfast while checking your schedule. You drive to work while your mind is already 3 meetings ahead. The entire day is a blur of multitasking, racing from one thing to the next, never fully present, never fully here. And then night comes. You're exhausted, but your brain won't shut off. It's still racing, still processing, still planning tomorrow before today is even over. You lie in bed, physically still, but mentally sprinting. And you wonder why you can't sleep, why you feel so tired even though you haven't really done anything that physically demanding. Dr. Penn calls this the velocity trap. We've mistaken speed for productivity, busyness for importance, constant motion for progress. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Speed is often the enemy of peace. And if you want a quiet mind, you're going to have to learn how to slow down. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Slow down? Are you kidding? I can't slow down. I have deadlines, responsibilities, people depending on me. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. And I get it. I really do. We live in a culture that glorifies hustle, that treats rest like laziness, that makes you feel guilty for taking a breath. But let me ask you this. How's that working out for you? Are you happy? Are you calm? Are you present? Or are you just surviving, running on fumes, one breakdown away from burning out completely? Slowing down isn't about doing less. It's about being more present with what you're doing. It's about quality over quantity, depth over breadth. It's about reclaiming your attention from the constant fragmentation that modern life demands. Let me paint you a picture of what I mean. Imagine you're eating lunch, really eating, not scrolling through your phone, not watching a video, not thinking about your next meeting, just eating, tasting the food, noticing the textures, the flavors, chewing slowly, being fully there. When was the last time you did that? When was the last time you did anything with your full attention? Most of us can't even remember, because we've trained ourselves to be everywhere except where we actually are. We're physically in one place, but mentally scattered across a dozen different places. And that fragmentation, that constant splitting of attention, is exhausting. It's why you can spend a whole day not doing much and still feel completely drained by the end of it. Dr. Penn explains that slowing down isn't really about your body. It's about your mind. You can walk slowly, talk slowly, move through your day at a leisurely pace. But if your thoughts are still racing at 100 miles per hour, you're not actually slow. You're just a fast mind trapped in a slower body. The goal is to slow the thinking, to create space between thoughts, to let each moment breathe before rushing to the next one. We live in an era of instant everything, instant messages, instant answers, instant entertainment, instant gratification. We've lost the ability to wait, to sit with uncertainty, to be bored. The moment we have a free second, we reach for our phones. We can't handle silence. We can't handle stillness. We've become addicted to stimulation, and like any addiction, it takes more and more to satisfy us. This addiction to speed creates a baseline of anxiety that we don't even notice anymore. It's just there, humming in the background, a constant low-level stress that we've normalized. We think it's just how things are, but it's not. It's a choice we're making over and over again without even realizing it. When you intentionally slow down, the first thing you'll feel is discomfort. Your mind will panic. It'll tell you that you're wasting time, that you should be doing something productive, that you're falling behind. This is normal. This is your nervous system protesting the change. But here's what's actually happening. You're teaching your body that there is no emergency, that it's safe to relax, that not everything is urgent. Anxiety thrives on the illusion of urgency. It convinces you that something bad is about to happen, that you need to stay on high alert. But when you slow down, you send a different signal. You tell your body, "We're okay. Nothing is chasing us. We can breathe." And gradually, the nervous system begins to recalibrate. One of the biggest benefits of slowing down is clarity. When everything is fast, your thinking becomes shallow. You skim the surface of things. You react instead of respond. You make decisions based on impulse rather than reflection. But when you slow down your thinking, you see things more clearly. You notice details you would have missed. You make connections you wouldn't have made. You respond with wisdom instead of reacting with fear. We often say, "I don't have time." But the truth is, we do have time. What we don't have is attention. We're trying to do too many things at once, and in doing so, we're not really doing any of them well. Multitasking has become a badge of honor in our society. We think it makes us efficient, but science tells us the opposite. Multitasking decreases productivity and increases stress. It fragments your brain and prevents you from entering deep focus. Slowing down gives you permission to do one thing at a time. And when you give something your full attention, it gets done faster and better than if you were half present while juggling 3 other things. Let's talk about the difference between fast thinking and slow thinking. Fast thinking is reactive. It's driven by fear, by the need to protect yourself, by the urgency to respond immediately. Slow thinking is reflective. It's driven by awareness, by curiosity, by the willingness to pause before acting. Fast thinking says, "I need to fix this now." Slow thinking says, "Let me understand what's actually happening here." Both have their place, but most of us live almost exclusively in fast thinking. We're so used to reacting that we've forgotten how to reflect. And that's where mistakes happen. That's where relationships break down. That's where we say things we regret, make decisions we wish we could take back, burn bridges we didn't mean to burn. Slowing down creates a gap, a pause, a moment of space between stimulus and response. And in that space, wisdom emerges. You stop being controlled by your impulses. You stop letting other people's reactions dictate your behavior. You become intentional. And intention is the foundation of a quiet mind. Social media has trained us to react instantly. Someone posts something, and within seconds, we're expected to have an opinion, to like, comment, share, engage. We've been conditioned to reward speed over thoughtfulness. But here's what that does to us. It turns us into reaction machines. We're not thinking, we're just responding. And every reaction drains our energy. Slowing down teaches you that not everything deserves a response. Not every post needs your comment. Not every argument needs your input. Not every opinion needs to be challenged. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. Sometimes walking away is the wisest move. When you slow down your pace intentionally, you start noticing things you've been missing. The way the morning light filters through your window, the sound of birds outside, the smell of coffee brewing, the smile on a stranger's face. These small moments have always been there, but you were moving too fast to see them. And these small moments, they're where peace lives. Not in some grand achievement or distant future, right here, in the tiny, ordinary details of everyday life. Anxiety lives in the future. Slowing down brings you back to the present. And the present is where life actually happens. Not in the past, which is already gone. Not in the future, which doesn't exist yet. Only now. And when you're fully in the now, anxiety doesn't have much room to operate. Slowing down also heals relationships. When you slow down your speech, when you listen without interrupting, when you're fully present with someone, they feel it. They feel safe. They feel seen. Most conflicts happen not because people disagree, but because they're not really listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. They're already formulating their response while the other person is still speaking. That's not communication. That's parallel monologues. Slow listening is more powerful than fast talking. When you genuinely listen, not to win, not to fix, not to judge, but just to understand, the entire dynamic shifts. Connection happens. And connection is the antidote to loneliness, which is one of the biggest drivers of anxiety in modern life. Now, I want to address a fear that comes up when people hear slow down. They think, if I slow down, I'll fall behind. Everyone else is moving fast. I can't afford to be slow. But here's the truth. The people who know their pace, who move sustainably, who don't burn themselves out, they're the ones who last. Burnout happens to people who are constantly pushing, constantly sprinting, never allowing themselves to rest. Slowing down doesn't make you weak. It makes you sustainable. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you sprint a marathon, you'll collapse before you reach the finish line. Dr. Penn emphasizes that slowing down is a choice. The world isn't going to slow down for you. Notifications will keep coming. Demands will keep piling up. Pressure will keep building. But you can decide that you're not going to match that pace. You can decide that you don't have to respond to every message immediately. You don't have to say yes to every request. You don't have to be available 24/7. These small boundaries protect your mental health. They create space for you to breathe. When you slow down, you also start listening to your body. Your body has been giving you signals for years. Signals of exhaustion, signals of stress, signals of emotional overload. But you've been ignoring them because you are too busy, too rushed, too focused on keeping up. Slowing down reconnects you with yourself. And self-connection is the greatest antidote to anxiety. Here's something beautiful. The most meaningful experiences in life happen slowly. Love doesn't happen in an instant. Understanding doesn't come in a rush. Creativity doesn't flourish under pressure. Healing doesn't happen overnight. All of these require time, space, patience. When you're constantly in a hurry, you turn these experiences into shallow versions of themselves. You skim the surface instead of diving deep. Slowing down gives you depth, and depth is where meaning lives. Over time, as you practice slowing down, you'll notice that your mind isn't as noisy. Thoughts still come, but they don't race. They don't pile on top of each other. They arrive, they're acknowledged, and they pass. You don't chase them. You don't fight them. You just watch them come and go. This is what inner silence feels like. Not the absence of thought, but the absence of chaos. Dr. Penn teaches that the art of slowing down is about understanding one fundamental truth. Speed and urgency are not the same thing. What's truly important often moves slowly. What moves fast is usually superficial. When you internalize this, you can slow down without guilt. You can rest without shame. You can be still without feeling like you're wasting time. In the end, slowing down isn't a luxury. It's a survival skill. It's how you stay sane in a world that's designed to overwhelm you. When you consciously slow your pace, you step off the autopilot of anxiety. You stop running the race nobody actually wins, and you start experiencing your life instead of just rushing through it. That's where peace is. Not at the finish line. Right here, in the slow, steady, present moment. CBT as a tool for inquiry, questioning your thoughts, not fighting them. All right, let's dive into something that might completely shift how you relate to your own mind. We're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. Now, before you tune out thinking this is going to be some clinical textbook lecture, stay with me. Because the way Dr. Penn talks about CBT isn't about fixing your broken brain. It's not about correcting faulty thinking like you're some kind of malfunctioning machine. It's about something much more profound: curiosity. Most people think CBT is about identifying bad thoughts and replacing them with good ones. Like your mind is full of errors that need debugging. But Dr. Penn approaches it differently. He sees CBT as a tool for inquiry, a way to become curious about your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. It's not about fighting your mind. It's about having a conversation with it. Here's the thing. Every single day, hundreds of thoughts pass through your mind. And here's the problem. We believe most of them. If your mind says, "You're not good enough," you believe it. If it says, "Something terrible is going to happen," you panic. If it says, "Everyone is judging you," you shrink. We take thoughts at face value as if they're facts, as if just because you thought it, it must be true. But thoughts aren't facts. They're interpretations. They're stories your mind is telling based on past experiences, fears, biases, and sometimes just random mental noise. The question Dr. Penn wants you to start asking is this: where did this thought come from? What's the evidence for it? Is this a fact, or is this just my imagination running wild? This is where CBT begins. Not with suppression, not with denial, but with inquiry. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a big presentation coming up, and a thought pops into your head. I'm going to mess this up. I always mess things up. Most people would hear that thought and immediately feel their confidence collapse. Their heart rate would spike. They'd start catastrophizing, imagining every possible way they could fail. And by the time they actually get to the presentation, they've already convinced themselves it's going to be a disaster. But CBT asks a different question. Instead of accepting that thought as truth, you pause and ask, is that actually true? Do I always mess things up? What's the evidence for that? Have there been times when I did well? What makes this time different? And here's what usually happens. When you actually examine the thought, it falls apart. Because it's not based on reality, it's based on fear. It's based on one or two past experiences that your mind has generalized into a universal truth. But one failure doesn't mean you always fail. One mistake doesn't define your entire capability. This process of questioning your thoughts is what Dr. Penn calls putting your thoughts on trial. Imagine your mind is a courtroom. A thought walks in and makes a claim. Instead of automatically believing it, you ask it to present evidence. You cross-examine it. You look for holes in its argument. And if it can't back up its claims, you dismiss it. This might sound cold or analytical, but it's actually incredibly liberating. Because once you realize that most of your anxious thoughts don't hold up under scrutiny, they lose their power over you. They stop feeling like absolute truths and start feeling like what they really are. Just thoughts. Mental events. Temporary visitors in your mind. Here's what makes CBT so powerful as a tool for inquiry. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't say, you're thinking wrong, stop it. It just says, let's investigate. Let's see what's really going on here. And that shift from judgment to curiosity changes everything. Because curiosity is the natural enemy of anxiety. When you're anxious, you're closed off, defensive, reactive. When you're curious, you're open, explorative, grounded. Dr. Penn describes our minds as incredibly skilled storytellers. They take incomplete information and weave entire narratives. Someone doesn't text you back immediately, and your mind creates a story. They're mad at me. I did something wrong. They don't like me anymore. You make one mistake at work, and your mind creates a story. I'm going to get fired. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. My career is over. These stories feel real. They trigger real emotions. But they're not facts. They're interpretations. And CBT helps you slow down that storytelling process. It asks, is this the only possible explanation? Could there be other reasons? Am I jumping to conclusions based on incomplete information? Most of the time, the answer is yes. There are other explanations. Maybe that person is just busy. Maybe they didn't see your message. Maybe they're dealing with their own stuff that has nothing to do with you. but your mind went straight to the worst-case scenario. Because that's what anxious minds do. They scan for threats. They catastrophize. They assume the worst to try to protect you from disappointment. But here's the irony. In trying to protect you, your anxious mind actually makes you suffer more. Because you end up living through disasters that never actually happen. Now, let me be clear about something important. CBT isn't about forcing positive thinking. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's not about replacing "I'm going to fail" with "everything is going to be perfect." Because that's not realistic either. That's just swapping one extreme for another. What CBT teaches is realistic thinking, balanced thinking, neither catastrophic nor blindly optimistic, just grounded in reality. So, when you have the thought, "This presentation might not go well," CBT doesn't tell you to think, "It's going to be amazing." Instead, it helps you think, "I've prepared as much as I can. I might make some mistakes, and that's okay. I've done presentations before, and most of them went fine. Even if this one isn't perfect, it won't be the end of the world." See the difference? One is rooted in fear. One is rooted in false optimism. And one is rooted in reality. And reality is where peace lives. CBT also helps you identify what Dr. Penn calls cognitive distortions, patterns of thinking that distort reality and fuel anxiety. Let me walk you through a few of the most common ones, because I guarantee you're doing at least a couple of these without even realizing it. Overgeneralization. This is when you take one negative experience and turn it into a universal rule. You fail at something once, and suddenly you're convinced you'll fail at everything forever. One person rejects you, and you decide you're unlovable. One plan falls through, and you believe nothing ever works out for you. See how extreme that is? But your mind does this automatically. Mind reading. This is when you assume you know what other people are thinking with zero evidence. Someone looks at you funny, and you're convinced they hate you. A friend seems distant, and you're sure they're upset with you. But you don't actually know what's going on in their head. You're just projecting your fears onto them. Catastrophizing. This is when you take a small problem and blow it up into a disaster. You make one mistake, and suddenly your entire life is ruined. You have one awkward conversation, and you're convinced your reputation is destroyed. Your mind skips over all the middle possibilities and jumps straight to the worst-case scenario. Once you learn to recognize these patterns, they lose their power. Because you start seeing them for what they are: habits. Mental shortcuts your brain has developed. And habits can be changed. Here's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Penn emphasizes that CBT isn't about fighting your thoughts. It's about changing your relationship with them. Most people are at war with their own minds. They hate their anxious thoughts. They try to suppress them, push them away, pretend they're not there. But that doesn't work. In fact, it usually makes things worse. Because the more you try not to think about something, the more it shows up. Instead, CBT teaches you to observe your thoughts. to create a little distance between you and them. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing your thoughts. That distinction is everything. When you identify with your thoughts, every thought shakes you. When you observe your thoughts, they become just mental events passing through. Imagine you're standing on the side of a highway, watching cars drive by. Some cars are sleek and shiny. Some are beaten up and rusty. But you don't chase after every car. You don't grab onto them and let them drag you down the road. You just watch them pass. That's what you can learn to do with thoughts. They come, you acknowledge them, and you let them go. This doesn't mean you ignore real problems or valid concerns. It means you stop treating every thought like an emergency. You stop giving every worry equal weight. You develop discernment. You learn to tell the difference between a thought that deserves your attention and a thought that's just noise. Dr. Penn talks about the concept of thought diffusion. This is a technique where you create distance from a thought by changing how you relate to it. Instead of thinking, "I'm a failure," you think, "I'm having the thought that I'm a failure." See the difference? One statement is an identity. The other is an observation. One feels permanent and absolute. The other feels temporary and flexible. You can even take it further. I notice my mind is telling me I'm a failure. Now you've created even more distance. Now it's clear that this is just your mind doing its thing, not a reflection of who you actually are. When you practice this, something amazing happens. Thoughts that used to devastate you start to lose their grip. They still show up, but they don't control you anymore, because you stopped believing everything your mind tells you. Let's talk about a common thought pattern that almost everyone struggles with. What if? What if this goes wrong? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if questions feel like you're being prepared, like you're planning ahead. But really, you're just torturing yourself with hypotheticals. CBT helps you recognize that what if is almost never based on present reality. It's a prediction, a guess, a story about a future that doesn't exist yet. And here's the kicker. Most of the things you worry about never actually happen. Studies show that the vast majority of our worries are about things that either never occur or turn out way less serious than we imagined. So when a what if thought pops up, CBT teaches you to ask, is this a fact or is this just a possibility? And if it's just a possibility, how likely is it really? And even if it does happen, can I handle it? Most of the time, the answer is, it's unlikely, and yes, you could handle it. And just recognizing that reduces the intensity of the anxiety. Dr. Penn also emphasizes the importance of self-compassion in this process. CBT isn't about beating yourself up for having anxious thoughts. It's not about calling yourself stupid or worrying. It's about gently, kindly questioning those thoughts. Like you would with a friend who's spiraling. You wouldn't yell at them. You'd say, "Hey, let's look at this together. Is this really as bad as it seems?" That's the tone you want to have with yourself. Supportive, curious, patient. Over time, as you practice this, your mind starts to learn. It stops generating as many exaggerated, catastrophic thoughts because it's learned that those thoughts don't hold up under scrutiny. It's like training a muscle. The more you question your thoughts, the stronger your rational mind becomes. The more you practice stepping back and observing, the quieter the mental noise gets. And here's the beautiful part. You don't become some emotionless robot. You don't stop feeling. You just stop being controlled by every feeling. You learn that you can feel anxious and still function. You can have the thought, "I might fail," and still take action. You can feel uncertain and still move forward. CBT as a tool for inquiry teaches you that a quiet mind isn't an empty mind. It's a mind where thoughts exist, but chaos doesn't. It's a mind where you're in conversation with your thoughts, not at war with them. It's a mind where you're the observer, not the prisoner. And when you master that, you step into a kind of freedom most people never experience. The freedom to think without being destroyed by your thoughts. The freedom to feel without being overwhelmed by your feelings. The freedom to live without being paralyzed by fear. That's the power of inquiry. That's the gift of questioning instead of believing. That's what happens when you stop fighting your mind and start understanding it. Let me ask you something. Who do you talk to the most in your life? Your partner? Your best friend? Your coworkers? Actually, none of them. The person you talk to the most is yourself. And I'm not talking about out loud conversations. I'm talking about that constant internal dialogue that runs in the background of your mind from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep. I can't believe I said that. Why am I so awkward? I should have done better. They probably think I'm stupid. I'm never going to get this right. This voice never stops. It comments on everything you do, every decision you make, every interaction you have. And here's the uncomfortable truth. For most people, that voice is cruel. It's harsh. It's unforgiving. It's the kind of voice you would never tolerate from another person. But because it's coming from inside your own head, you accept it. You believe it. You let it define you. Dr. Penn says that one of the most transformative things you can do for your mental health is to change the way you talk to yourself. Not by pretending everything is perfect, not by lying to yourself with toxic positivity, but by treating yourself with the same kindness, patience, and encouragement you would offer to someone you care about. He calls this becoming your own inner cheerleader. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this sounds cheesy, hear me out. This isn't about standing in front of a mirror saying affirmations that you don't believe. This isn't about faking confidence or pretending you don't have weaknesses. This is about fundamentally shifting the tone of your internal dialogue from one of criticism and judgment to one of support and compassion. Because here's the reality. The way you talk to yourself shapes your reality. It shapes your confidence. It shapes your decisions. It shapes how you show up in the world. If your internal voice is constantly telling you that you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, that you don't deserve good things, guess what? That becomes your identity. Not because it's true, but because you've repeated it to yourself so many times that your brain accepts it as fact. Let's talk about the inner critic. Everyone has one. It's that voice that pops up the second something goes wrong. You make a mistake at work, and immediately the voice says, "You're so incompetent. Everyone's going to think you're an idiot." You have an awkward social interaction, and the voice says, "You're so weird. Why can't you just be normal?" You see someone doing better than you, and the voice says, "You're so behind. You'll never catch up." This voice is so familiar that most people don't even question it. They assume it's just being realistic or keeping themselves in check. They think that being hard on themselves is what pushes them to improve. But here's what research actually shows. Self-criticism doesn't motivate growth. It creates fear, shame, and paralysis. It doesn't make you work harder. It makes you want to give up. Think about it. If you had a coach who constantly told you that you were terrible, that you'd never succeed, that you should just quit, would that motivate you? Of course not. You'd fire that coach. But that's exactly the kind of coaching most people give themselves every single day. Now, let me introduce you to a concept Dr. Penn uses that I think is brilliant. He says, imagine you're the brand manager of your own life. A brand manager's job is to protect and promote the brand. They wouldn't go around telling everyone that their product is garbage. They wouldn't sabotage their own company by spreading negative messages about it. They'd be strategic, supportive, and focused on highlighting strengths while working on weaknesses. That's what you need to do for yourself. You need to manage your own internal brand. And right now, most people are terrible brand managers. They're constantly undermining themselves, criticizing themselves, pointing out every flaw and mistake. They're running a smear campaign against themselves in their own minds. Now, here's where people get confused. They think that being your own inner cheerleader means lying to yourself. It means pretending you're perfect when you're not. It means ignoring your mistakes or refusing to acknowledge areas where you need to grow. But that's not what this is about at all. An inner cheerleader is realistic and supportive. It's the difference between saying, "I'm a complete failure," and saying, "I made a mistake and I can learn from this." It's the difference between saying, "I'm so stupid," and saying, "That was a tough situation and I didn't handle it the way I wanted to. Next time, I'll try a different approach." See the difference? Both acknowledge the problem, but one destroys you and one empowers you. Here's a question Dr. Penn asks that stopped me in my tracks. If your best friend came to you after failing an exam, what would you say to them? Would you say, "You are worthless. You'll never succeed. You should just give up"? Of course not. You'd say something like, "Hey, that test was really hard. You studied, and that's what matters. Let's figure out what went wrong and come up with a better strategy for next time." So why don't you talk to yourself that way? Why is it that you can be compassionate, understanding, and encouraging to everyone else in your life, but when it comes to yourself, you're brutal? What makes you think you deserve less kindness than the people around you? Most people have never thought about this. They've just accepted that being harsh with themselves is normal. But it's not. And it's costing you your peace of mind. Let me tell you what happens when you start practicing supportive self-talk. At first, it feels fake. Your inner critic has been running the show for so long that any other voice feels foreign. You'll think things like, "This is stupid. I don't believe this. I'm just lying to myself." And that's okay. That's normal. You're not going to undo decades of negative self-talk overnight. But if you stick with it, something shifts. The first step is awareness. You have to start noticing how you talk to yourself. Most people are on autopilot. They don't even realize how harsh their internal dialogue is until they start paying attention. So here's what I want you to do. For the next few days, just observe. When something goes wrong, when you make a mistake, when you feel embarrassed, when you're disappointed in yourself, pause. Listen to what your mind is saying. Write it down if you can. I promise you, when you actually see it written out, you'll be shocked at how cruel it is. You'll see patterns. You'll see the same insults repeated over and over. And you'll start to realize that this isn't truth. This is just a habit, a very old, very ingrained habit. But habits can be changed. Once you have awareness, the next step is intervention. When you catch your inner critic being harsh, don't just let it keep going. You interrupt it. You challenge it. You say, "Wait, is that true? Would I say this to someone I care about? Is there a kinder, more helpful way to frame this?" Let me give you an example. Let's say you forgot an important meeting. Your inner critic immediately jumps in. "You're so irresponsible. You can't even remember basic things. You're going to get fired. Everyone thinks you're incompetent." Now, pause. Challenge that. Ask yourself, is that true? Have I forgotten meetings before? Or is this a rare mistake? Does one forgotten meeting mean I'm completely irresponsible? Or does it mean I'm human and I made an error? If my friend forgot a meeting, would I tell them they're worthless? Or would I tell them it happens and they should just apologize and reschedule? When you slow down and actually question the narrative, you realize how exaggerated and unfair it is. And then you can replace it with something more balanced. "I forgot the meeting, and that's not ideal. I'll apologize, reschedule, and set a reminder so it doesn't happen again. This doesn't define me as a person." See how that feels different? It's still acknowledging the mistake, but it's not catastrophizing. It's not turning a small error into a character assassination. Dr. Penn talks a lot about the language we use with ourselves, because words matter. Words aren't just sounds, they're instructions. Your brain listens to the words you use and treats them as truth. If you constantly say, "I always mess things up," your brain starts looking for evidence to support that. It starts filtering your experiences through that lens. And before you know it, you've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the good news. It works both ways. If you start using more compassionate, realistic language with yourself, your brain starts to believe that too. Not because you're lying to yourself, but because you're highlighting the full picture instead of only focusing on the negative. One of the biggest changes people notice when they start being kinder to themselves is that failure becomes less scary. When your self-worth is tied to never making mistakes, every failure feels like the end of the world. You avoid taking risks because you can't handle the thought of messing up. But when you learn to treat yourself with compassion, even when things go wrong, failure becomes just feedback. It becomes information, not devastation. You start seeing yourself as someone who tries, who learns, who grows, regardless of the outcome. And that shift is incredibly freeing, because now your value isn't dependent on being perfect. It's dependent on being human. And humans make mistakes. That's not a flaw. That's just the nature of being alive. Let me share something personal for a second. I used to have the loudest inner critic. Every mistake I made, I would replay it over and over in my head, each time adding more commentary about how stupid I was, how I should have known better, how I was always like this. It was exhausting. And it didn't make me better. It just made me more anxious, more hesitant, more afraid to try new things. But when I started practicing what Dr. Penn teaches, when I started catching that voice and replacing it with something kinder, everything changed. Not overnight, but gradually. I started taking more risks because I knew that even if I failed, I wouldn't destroy myself over it. I started being more present in conversations because I wasn't constantly judging every word that came out of my mouth. I started enjoying my life more because I wasn't living under the constant weight of self-criticism. And here's the thing. I didn't become delusional. I didn't start thinking I was perfect. I just stopped being my own worst enemy. I became my own ally. And that made all the difference. Your inner cheerleader isn't someone who tells you you're amazing at everything. It's someone who reminds you that you're doing your best, that you're learning, that you're worthy of kindness, even when you mess up. It's the voice that says, "You've got this," not because success is guaranteed, but because you're capable of handling whatever comes. So here's what I want you to start doing. Every time you catch your inner critic being harsh, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? Then say that to yourself. It might feel awkward at first. It might feel fake. But keep doing it. Because over time, that new voice will start to feel more natural. And the old, cruel voice will start to fade. You deserve to have someone in your corner. And if no one else is there, you can be. You should be. Because the relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for every other relationship in your life. If you're constantly at war with yourself, you can't fully show up for anyone else. But when you're at peace with yourself, when you're your own supporter instead of your own saboteur, everything shifts. This isn't about arrogance. It's about respect. Self-respect. The kind of respect that says, I'm human, I'm flawed, I'm learning, and I'm worthy of kindness from others and from myself. So let's make a commitment right now. For the next week, pay attention to your self-talk. Notice when the inner critic shows up, and every time it does, challenge it. Replace it with something kinder, something more realistic, something more supportive. It won't be easy. Old habits die hard. But you're worth the effort. Because here's the truth. You've been listening to that critical voice for years, maybe decades. And it hasn't made you happier. It hasn't made you more successful. It's just made you tired. So maybe it's time to try something different. Maybe it's time to become the voice that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. Maybe it's time to become your own inner cheerleader. If you've been with me through this entire journey, you've learned how to let go of the uncontrollable, how to focus on action over outcome, how to slow down in a world that's constantly rushing, and how to question your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. Now, we're going to bring it all together by talking about the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. In the last section, we talked about recognizing your inner critic and beginning to challenge it. Now, I want to take this deeper, because becoming your own inner cheerleader isn't just about changing a few negative thoughts. It's about fundamentally transforming the entire ecosystem of your mind. It's about creating an internal environment where peace can actually take root and grow. Let's pick up where we left off. You've started noticing your self-talk. You've caught your inner critic in the act a few times. Maybe you've even managed to replace some of those harsh thoughts with kinder ones. But here's what often happens next: resistance. Your mind fights back. It says, "This is ridiculous. You're just being soft. You need to be hard on yourself to stay motivated. If you're too nice to yourself, you'll become lazy and complacent." This is a very common fear, and Dr. Penn addresses it head on. There's this misconception that self-compassion equals self-indulgence. That if you stop criticizing yourself, you'll lose your edge. You'll stop trying. You'll settle for mediocrity. But research shows the exact opposite is true. People who practice self-compassion are actually more motivated, more resilient, and more likely to persist after failure than people who are self-critical. Here's why. When you're driven by fear and criticism, you're operating from a place of, "I have to do this or I'm worthless." That kind of motivation is fragile. It works for a while, but eventually you burn out. Eventually, the fear becomes so overwhelming that you freeze. You avoid challenges because you can't handle the thought of failing and proving your inner critic right. But when you're driven by self-support and compassion, you're operating from a place of, "I want to grow. I want to see what I'm capable of. And if I fail, I'll learn and try again." That kind of motivation is sustainable. It's not dependent on never making mistakes. It's dependent on your willingness to keep showing up, even when things are hard. So no, being your own cheerleader doesn't make you soft. It makes you strong enough to take risks. It makes you brave enough to fail and get back up. It gives you the emotional foundation to actually pursue the things that matter to you. Now, let's talk about the specific ways you can cultivate this inner cheerleader. Because it's one thing to understand the concept intellectually, and another thing entirely to live it. First, practice self-compassion in moments of failure. This is where most people struggle the most. When things go well, it's easy to be nice to yourself. But when you mess up, when you fall short, when you embarrass yourself, that's when the inner critic comes out in full force. And that's exactly when you need your inner cheerleader the most. Dr. Penn recommends a simple but powerful practice. When something goes wrong, pause and ask yourself, What would I say to my best friend right now? Then say that to yourself, out loud if you can. It might feel awkward. It might feel like you're talking to a child. But your inner child, the part of you that's hurting and scared, needs to hear it. Let me give you a real example. Let's say you just had a job interview and you completely bombed it. You stuttered. You forgot important points. You left feeling humiliated. Your inner critic is going wild. You blew it. You'll never get a job. You're such a failure. Why do you even try? Now pause, take a breath, and imagine your best friend just came to you and said they had a terrible interview. What would you say? You'd probably say something like, "Hey, interviews are tough. Everyone has off days. You did your best with the nerves you were dealing with. And you know what? Even if this one didn't work out, there will be other opportunities. You're not defined by one bad interview." Now say that to yourself. Mean it. Feel it. Because it's true. One bad interview doesn't erase your skills, your experience, your worth. It just means you had a tough moment. And tough moments are part of being human. Second, celebrate small wins. Your inner critic never misses a mistake. It catalogs every error, every misstep, every time you fell short. But here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't celebrate your wins. It doesn't acknowledge your progress. It doesn't give you credit for the things you do well. And that imbalance is toxic. Your inner cheerleader needs to actively highlight the positives, not in a fake, exaggerated way, but in a genuine, acknowledging way. Did you get out of bed even though you were exhausted? That's worth noting. Did you have a difficult conversation that you'd been avoiding? Acknowledge that courage. Did you choose to go for a walk instead of scrolling on your phone? That's a win. Most people are waiting for some huge achievement before they allow themselves to feel good. They think, "I'll celebrate when I get the promotion, when I lose the weight, when I hit the goal." But that's not how sustainable motivation works. You need small, consistent encouragement along the way. You need to train your brain to notice progress, not just perfection. Try this. At the end of each day, write down 3 things you did well. They don't have to be monumental. They just have to be real. Maybe you were patient with someone who annoyed you. Maybe you ate a healthy meal. Maybe you finished a task you'd been procrastinating on. Write them down. Let your brain register that you're doing good things, even if they're small. Over time, this practice rewires your brain to look for the positive instead of only focusing on the negative. And that shift from a deficit-focused mindset to a progress-focused mindset is life-changing. Third, set boundaries with your inner critic. Here's something most people don't realize. You don't have to listen to every thought your mind produces. Just because a thought shows up doesn't mean it deserves your attention. Your inner critic will always have opinions. It will always find something to criticize. But you get to decide whether you engage with it or not. Think of your inner critic like a radio station that's always playing in the background. You can't turn it off completely, but you can turn down the volume. you can choose not to tune in. When that critical voice starts up, you can say, "Thanks for sharing, but I'm not interested in that narrative right now." Dr. Penn calls this cognitive distance. You're not fighting the thought. You're not pretending it's not there. You're just creating space between you and it. You're recognizing that it's a thought, not a truth. And that recognition gives you power. Here's a practical way to do this. When a harsh thought pops up, label it. Say to yourself, "That's my inner critic talking." Just that simple act of naming it creates distance. It reminds you that this is just one voice in your head, not the voice of ultimate truth. And once you've labeled it, you can choose not to engage. You can say, "I hear you, but I'm choosing to focus on something more helpful right now." Fourth, surround yourself with supportive influences. Your inner dialogue doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's shaped by the people you spend time with, the content you consume, the environments you're in. If you're constantly surrounded by criticism, whether from other people, from social media, from toxic work environments, it's going to be much harder to cultivate a supportive inner voice. Pay attention to who and what you're allowing into your mental space. Are the people in your life lifting you up or tearing you down? Are you following social media accounts that make you feel inadequate? Are you consuming content that feeds your anxiety or content that nourishes your growth? You have more control over this than you think. You can unfollow accounts that make you feel bad about yourself. You can set boundaries with people who are constantly critical. You can choose to spend more time with people who see your potential and encourage your growth. Your external environment influences your internal environment, so be intentional about curating it. Fifth, practice forgiveness, especially toward yourself. One of the heaviest burdens people carry is the weight of past mistakes. Things they did years ago, things they said, choices they regret. And they punish themselves for these things over and over again, as if enough self-punishment will somehow undo the past. But it won't. The past is done, and continuing to beat yourself up over it doesn't serve anyone. Not you, not the people you hurt, not anyone. What does serve you is learning from it, and then letting it go. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen or that it didn't matter. It means accepting that you're human, that you made mistakes, and that you're committed to doing better moving forward. Dr. Penn says that self-forgiveness is one of the most radical acts of self-love you can practice. Because it requires you to look at the worst parts of yourself, the parts you're most ashamed of, and say, "I see you. I understand why you did what you did, and I'm choosing to release you from this prison of guilt." That doesn't mean there are no consequences. It doesn't mean you don't make amends if needed. But it means you stop using your past as a weapon against yourself. Here's a powerful question to ask yourself. If I can't forgive myself for this, who benefits? Does holding on to this guilt make you a better person? Does it help the people you hurt? Does it change the past? No. All it does is keep you stuck. And being stuck doesn't serve anyone. So let it go, not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually, gently, with compassion. Forgive yourself the way you would forgive someone you love, because you deserve that too. Sixth, redefine success. So much of our inner criticism comes from impossible standards. We've absorbed society's definition of success: money, status, perfection, constant productivity, and we measure ourselves against it, and we always fall short. Because those standards weren't designed for human beings. They were designed by systems that profit from our insecurity. Your inner cheerleader helps you redefine success on your own terms. Maybe success isn't having a perfect body. Maybe it's having a body that you treat with respect and care. Maybe success isn't being the best at everything. Maybe it's showing up consistently and trying your best. Maybe success isn't never feeling anxious. Maybe it's feeling anxious and doing the thing anyway. When you redefine success around values instead of achievements, everything shifts. Because now you can succeed every single day just by living in alignment with what matters to you. You don't have to wait for some distant goal to feel proud of yourself. You can feel proud right now for the choices you're making, for the person you're becoming. Seventh, remember that this is a practice, not a destination. Becoming your own inner cheerleader isn't something you do once and then you're done. It's a daily practice. Some days you'll nail it. You'll catch every critical thought and replace it with something kind. Other days you'll slip back into old patterns. You'll be harsh with yourself, and you won't even notice until later. And that's okay. That's part of the process. Progress isn't linear. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't linear. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when you forget everything you've learned and fall back into old habits. But that doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you're human. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. The goal is showing up for yourself again and again, even when it's hard. Even when you don't feel like it. Even when that critical voice is screaming at you. You show up anyway. You choose kindness anyway. And slowly, over time, that becomes your default. Bringing it all together. So here we are. We've journeyed through letting go of what you can't control. We've explored focusing on action instead of obsessing over outcomes. We've learned the art of slowing down in a world that glorifies speed. We've discovered how to question our thoughts instead of blindly believing them. And we've talked about the transformative power of becoming your own inner cheerleader. All of these pieces work together. They're not separate strategies. They're different aspects of the same fundamental truth. Peace comes from within, not from external achievements, not from other people's approval, not from having everything figured out. From within. A quiet mind isn't a mind without thoughts. It's a mind that isn't controlled by thoughts. It's a mind that can observe, question, and choose. It's a mind that treats itself with kindness instead of cruelty. It's a mind that focuses on what it can control and releases what it can't. It's a mind that moves through life with intention instead of anxiety. This is the art Dr. Marcus Penn is teaching us, and it's an art worth mastering. Because when you cultivate inner peace, everything else becomes easier. Relationships improve because you're not projecting your inner chaos onto others. Work becomes more fulfilling because you're not constantly doubting yourself. Challenges become manageable because you're not adding layers of self-criticism on top of them. You start showing up as the fullest version of yourself. Not perfect, not without flaws, but whole, integrated, at peace. So I want to leave you with this. The journey to a quiet mind isn't about reaching some destination where you never feel anxious again, where you never doubt yourself, where everything is always calm. That's not realistic. Life is messy. Emotions are messy. Being human is messy. But you can learn to navigate that mess with grace, with compassion, with wisdom. You can learn to be your own anchor in the storm instead of waiting for external circumstances to calm down. You can learn to trust yourself, support yourself, and show up for yourself in ways that maybe no one ever taught you how to do. That's what this book is about. That's what this entire journey has been about. And I hope wherever you are right now, you feel a little more equipped, a little more hopeful, a little more ready to build that quiet mind you've been searching for. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. It's not easy, but it's worth it. You're worth it. Now go be your own cheerleader. The world needs more people who are at peace with themselves. Conclusion: the journey to a quiet mind. So here we are at the end of this exploration. But really, this isn't an ending. It's a beginning. Because everything we've talked about, everything Dr. Marcus Penn teaches in The Art of a Quiet Mind with Positive Psychology, is just the start of your journey toward inner peace. Let me take a moment to recap what we've covered, because these aren't just concepts to understand intellectually. These are practices to live by, tools to return to again and again when life gets overwhelming. We started with letting go of the uncontrollable, and we learned that most of our mental noise comes from trying to control things that were never ours to control in the first place. Other people's opinions, the past, outcomes that depend on 1,000 variables beyond us. We learned that letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that our power lies not in controlling external circumstances, but in choosing our response to them. When you release your grip on the uncontrollable, you finally gain control over the one thing that matters most: your own peace of mind. Then we explored action over outcome. We discovered that anxiety lives in the future, in the what-ifs and the catastrophic predictions our minds love to create. But action lives in the present. When you shift your focus from obsessing over results to fully engaging with what you're doing right now, anxiety loses its grip. You stop being paralyzed by fear of failure because your identity is no longer tied to outcomes. It's tied to effort, to showing up, to doing your best with what you have. And that shift from outcome-obsessed to action-focused transforms not just your productivity, but your entire relationship with stress. We dove into the art of slowing down. In a world that glorifies speed and busyness, we learned that true peace comes from intentionally decelerating, not just your body, but your mind, slowing down your thoughts, creating space between stimulus and response, learning to be fully present instead of constantly racing ahead. We discovered that the most meaningful experiences in life, love, understanding, creativity, connection, all require slowness. They require depth. And you can't have depth when you're skimming across the surface at 100 miles per hour. Then came CBT as a tool for inquiry. We learned that our thoughts aren't facts. They're interpretations. Stories our minds tell based on fear, past experiences, and cognitive shortcuts. And instead of blindly believing every thought that pops into our heads, we can question them, put them on trial, ask for evidence. This practice of inquiry doesn't make you cynical or disconnected. It makes you free. Free from the tyranny of catastrophic thinking. Free from the prison of self-doubt. Free to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. And finally, we explored becoming your own inner cheerleader. We confronted the harsh reality that most of us have an inner critic that's relentlessly cruel. And we learned that you can't build a peaceful life on a foundation of self-hatred. Self-compassion isn't self-indulgence. It's the fuel for sustainable growth. It's what allows you to take risks, to fail, to learn, and to keep going. When you become your own supporter instead of your own saboteur, everything changes. Not because you become arrogant or delusional, but because you finally treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer to anyone else you care about. All of these pieces work together. They're not isolated techniques. They're interconnected practices that build on each other. When you let go of the uncontrollable, you have more energy to focus on your actions. When you focus on action instead of outcome, you naturally slow down and become more present. When you slow down, you create space to question your thoughts. And when you question your thoughts with compassion instead of criticism, you cultivate that inner cheerleader who supports you through it all. This is the architecture of a quiet mind. Now, I want to be real with you for a moment. If you're expecting that after reading this, your anxiety will disappear forever, that you'll never have another negative thought, that life will suddenly become easy, that's not going to happen. That's not how this works. You're still going to have hard days. You're still going to face challenges. You're still going to feel anxious sometimes, doubt yourself sometimes, get caught up in mental noise sometimes. But here's what will change. You'll have tools. You'll have awareness. You'll have practices to return to. And most importantly, you'll have a different relationship with those difficult moments. Instead of being destroyed by them, you'll be able to navigate through them. Instead of adding layers of self-criticism on top of your struggles, you'll be able to meet yourself with compassion. Instead of feeling helpless and overwhelmed, you'll remember that you have agency. You have choice. You have power. The quiet mind that Dr. Penn talks about isn't a destination you reach and then you're done. It's a practice you return to again and again. Some days you'll feel incredibly peaceful. You'll catch yourself and think, wow, I've really changed. Other days you'll slip back into old patterns. You'll overthink. You'll criticize yourself. You'll try to control things you can't control. And you might feel like you've lost all your progress. But you haven't, because even recognizing that you've slipped is progress. Even knowing there's another way to be is progress. Even having the tools to get back on track is progress. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't linear. And peace isn't something you achieve once and then maintain effortlessly forever. It's something you choose over and over in small moments throughout your day. So what do you do now? How do you take everything we've talked about and actually apply it to your life? Start small. Don't try to overhaul your entire mindset overnight. Pick one practice that resonated with you most. Maybe it's the practice of questioning your thoughts before believing them. Maybe it's the practice of catching your inner critic and replacing it with something kinder. Maybe it's the practice of asking yourself, what can I do right now when anxiety hits? Pick one and commit to practicing it for a week. Just a week. See what happens, and then build from there. Add another practice. Layer them on top of each other. Be patient with yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. You've spent years, maybe decades, building the mental habits you have now. It's going to take time to build new ones. But every single effort counts. Every time you choose curiosity over judgment, action over worry, compassion over criticism, you're rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways. You're becoming a different person. Remember this. The goal isn't to never feel negative emotions. The goal isn't to become some perfectly calm, Zen-like being who floats through life unbothered. That's not realistic, and, honestly, it's not even desirable. Emotions are part of being human. Struggle is part of being human. The goal is to develop a healthy relationship with those emotions and struggles. To feel them without being consumed by them. To acknowledge them without letting them define you. You can feel anxious and still take action. You can doubt yourself and still move forward. You can be imperfect and still be worthy of kindness. These things can coexist. And learning to hold that paradox, that's where peace lives. I also want to acknowledge something important. If you're dealing with severe anxiety, depression, or trauma, the practices in this book are helpful, but they might not be enough on their own. And that's okay. There's no shame in seeking professional help. Therapy, medication, support groups, these are all valid and valuable resources. Taking care of yourself. Mental health is one of the bravest things you can do. So if you need more support than a book can provide, please reach out for it. You deserve that help. For everyone else, I want to leave you with this final thought. The work you do on yourself, the work of building a quiet mind, isn't just for you. It ripples outward. When you're at peace with yourself, you show up differently in your relationships. You're more patient, more present, more compassionate. When you stop projecting your inner chaos onto the people around you, your connections deepen, your conflicts decrease, your capacity for love expands. When you're at peace with yourself, you make better decisions. You're not operating from fear or desperation. You're operating from clarity and intention. And better decisions lead to better outcomes, which lead to a better life. When you're at peace with yourself, you become a light for others. People see it, they feel it, and sometimes, without even trying, you inspire them to do their own inner work. You give them permission to be human, to struggle, to heal. Your peace becomes contagious. So the journey to a quiet mind isn't selfish. It's one of the most generous things you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose life you touch. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for being open to these ideas. Thank you for being willing to look inward, to question, to grow. That takes courage. That takes humility. That takes hope. And all of those qualities are already inside you. You just needed to be reminded. Go forth with kindness toward yourself and toward others. Go forth with awareness of your thoughts, your patterns, your power. Go forth with intention, choosing peace over chaos, action over worry, compassion over criticism. Your quiet mind is waiting for you, not somewhere out there in the future, right here, right now, in this moment, in the next breath you take, in the next choice you make. It's yours. Claim it.